This Long Hill Elementary School was another place she had spent 4 years. This school was recognized as a National Blue Ribbon School for the U.S. Department of Education. The school was praised for effective school characteristics to include active teaching and learning strategies, student empowerment, stakeholder involvement, and strong instructional leadership. She received her EDD in Educational Leadership and her EDS from Wingate University. She received an MA in School Administration and Supervision Education from Fayetteville State University and her BA in Education from Fayetteville State University. Please give her some NELA snaps. Dr. Melanie Hamlin.
This next educator is currently employed with Pitt County Schools as the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources. She enjoys reading, singing, and spending time with her family and friends. She finds great joy in helping others. She has been employed within the school system for 23 years, with the last 16 years in administration. She has served as a 5th grade teacher and assistant principal for elementary and 4 through 8 schools, as well as the principal of a K through 8 and middle school. She recently completed her doctorate in education in May of 2013. She has had extensive training in the evaluation process and serves as a district administration for NCEES. She is heavily involved in the teacher recruitment process, and she personally interacts and trains beginning teachers on the professional teaching standards during the new teacher induction. She is married to Les Jackson. That's not Michael, that's Les Jackson. And she has had 2 adorable young men, that is Bryce and Camden. None other on today would we like to welcome Dr. Delilah Jackson. Give her a round of applause.
And last but certainly not least, our next distinguished panel guest member is going to be coming to you from Northampton County Schools, where she will assume the role as superintendent July 1st. Prior to becoming named the superintendent for Northampton, she has completed education at East Carolina University, where she got her doctorate in, I believe, 2010. She has had experiences as a teacher, as a chief academic officer, as a director of accountability in secondary education, as a director of student services, testing, and accountability, and she began her time as a mathematics teacher in Gaston, North Carolina. This individual that's coming to you has been a guest speaker for countless professional developments and presentations. She currently holds an office with NCDPI CTE Advisory Council committee member that is part of the Northeast Region Freshman Representative from October 2013 to present. She has had grants and projects that have included $12,050 award for research into practice, school executive focused on instructional and strategic leadership in pursuit of rigor. She has gotten other grants such as research into practice, capitalizing on professional learning communities, opportunities to change in the classroom. She comes to us with many awards, such as the Principal's Excellence and Achievement Award. Let's give a warm NELA welcome for none other than Dr. Monica Smith-Luther.
And we'd like to say welcome to our guests to the NELA Court Vegas show. And wherever goes on in Vegas, stays in Vegas. Thank you. So today, we're going to start off with some questions, and feel free to interact and have follow-up questions if you feel the need for it. And so I'm going to turn it over to our very capable co-host, and that is none other than Miss Vanna White.
Thank you. I'm going to start with some questions. Some they may all answer, some one person may answer. We're just going to see how it goes. We have the questions that you gave us, but we don't have to operate from the script. So if you have a follow-up, just raise your hand and we'll try to get as many as we can through this afternoon. One of the questions we have that falls under human resources leadership is, how do you handle teachers that you know are not doing what they're supposed to do?
I will start now. First of all, basically you just follow the guidelines for, dealing with teachers. You observe, you document, you have individual conversations. After every conversation that you have with somebody regarding whether the things that they're doing well or things that they're not doing well, we always suggest that you summarize in a letter, and you put on the bottom of that letter that it's going to be copied to their file. When you give that person the letter, you need to have them sign that they're receiving the letter, not saying that they agree with the content of the letter, but they're documenting and proving so that you have that documentation that they actually have received it. That's basically what you do. You follow a trail of documentation. It's important when you write letters to teachers regarding their behavior or things that they're doing or not doing. It's really important that it be not emotional. This is what it is. This is what happened. This is what I saw, or this is what I didn't see. One of the things I learned during my doctoral program, which served me well, is very often if something comes up and you pose a question, if you pose a question to that teacher or staff member, and have them respond via email to you within a certain period of time, they will tell on themselves a whole lot when they're putting it through email and they're not realizing that it's documentation. You print that out and that becomes part of the file. So having those open-ended questions that they respond to by a given period of time helps as well.
And can you share as follow-up if they refuse to sign when you're trying to give them a letter or
Great question. Basically, you just document on there that at such and such a time they refuse to sign receipt of the letter, and you sign, and then hopefully you have a witness there as well, and they would sign as well.
Ditto to what she said. Great job. I want to come hire you. One thing I would add too that I always share with my administrators is that when you're working with the teachers, there's two purposes. The number one purpose is for improvement. If somebody's having a concern, then you have to do all the things that she has to, that she's talked about support. Coaching, getting them resources, talking to them, letting them know through documentation and meeting and conferences that there's some concerns. Be positive on the things that they've done right. Work through the things that they're not quite there on. And then if you have the need to put them on a plan, let them know what the purpose of that plan is. And I'm quite sure all of you know about the lovely process that we have at this point in time. But it serves the purpose of improvement. And then if they're not improvement, you have to go to the other side and say, now we're going to have to start documenting because we've given you all that we've given you. And now we're going to have to move forward with some other actions that we hope at the end will result in you finally letting the light bulb come on, or that we're going to have to invite you to find other employment. That's a nice way to say it.
And I'd like to add to, there too, that's important with your documentation, but when you are working with teachers, just as you were classroom teachers, you're working with your students, and they're all at various levels. And you need to recognize that you need to differentiate, and you need to provide that support. So when you're having concerns with teachers, be sure that you outline those expectations along with the facts. You need to outline those expectations, and you need to support them. If professional development is needed, if human support is needed, outline that and give them an opportunity to give input on what it is they feel they need to grow professionally, and provide that support, because at the same time you're documenting, you're also responsible for meeting those needs, whether they're developmental needs or not.
Okay, very good. And I'm sure these ladies would attest to the same thing. Even while you're going through this process, it's important you as an administrator to keep you cool so that the light doesn't shift from that person to you. And so if you follow these steps and processes that they have down, I think you should come out fine and making sure you keep it. I always keep this thing in a help, and then acts. You know. So
yes. Your goal at the end is for. I've actually had someone, and I work in HR, so of course I'm one that has to really deliver the news. And I've actually had someone to tell me thank you. And the superintendent was actually surprised. She's like, oh, I said, well, we've done all that we could do. I've been in her classroom. I observed kindergartners going to the bathroom and come out for 15 minutes so she didn't know where they were. It's there. It's factual. She knows that we've given her all that she could. And she said, thank you, I appreciate it, and moved on to another career.
You definitely have to be neutral and mask your own frustrations that you may be having with this person, and do so in a professional and human manner.
Right. And we have a question from the audience. We left our mics, but go.
Testing.
Spider-Man gone.
I've got a question in terms of the process of documentation with teachers that might not follow protocol, but let me give you a scenario and ask you how you might respond to this. So there's a teacher A, and she is good in the classroom. When she's in the classroom, she teaches students. Classroom management is what it should be, but paperwork is never turned in. She misses days. She doesn't call you. She's 3 hours late. She doesn't go to staff meetings. You can document and you can ask her, but then you run the risk of hiring somebody who might be on time but can't teach. So what are some disciplinary measures you could put in effect where you don't want to ask the person, but they continuously will not follow protocol?
You actually had a good question, Peter Parker.
His name is Keith
It's on
Parker.
a thunderstorm soon, I'm sure.
I think you have to look at that two ways, and I'll just go straight. First of all, if that person's lack of participation and being a team player is affecting my staff, then I can replace with a decent, I can find a good teacher. What I can't have happen is that teacher's lack of coming to professional development or coming in late and all of those things, if that's going to spread, absolutely not. But, and either way, when you're 3 hours late or whatever, our number one job is the safety of students. If you're 3 hours late, you're infringing on the safety of our students. Something could happen. It's unacceptable. So basically what I would do is I would be having a conversation with that person, and we would be documenting those things. If you think about the standards for teaching, classroom instruction is 2 of them out of 6. So she is not meeting 4 out of 6 standards by her not doing all of those things that you listed there. And so I would have a conversation, I would document that conversation through the letter, just like I talked about as well, and it would be effective. It would be reflected on her evaluation, which would then result in her having monitored professional development. Because if it's okay for her, why would it be okay for me? Period.
And I would agree in standard 1, teacher leadership, that's not being a leader in your building, and others watch you. When you're an administrator, they're going to test you. They're going to see if you're going to deal with that one person that's not doing it, and then they may start doing it themselves, or they're going to turn off from you and say you don't care about what's going on in our building, and you don't want that apathy to spread. So they're watching to see if you're really going to deal with that person that's not doing the right things. Follow policy. I always tell my administrators, go look at the policy, professional ethics, reputation, because parents will start calling and seeing sometimes that person's not in the building. They're driving in when they're driving up. So there are ways that you have to do it. You have to be very, very strategic. And I can brag on this young lady right here because we actually had a very, very strong case where she did excellent documentation. And actually, that's one of the hardest things to document. You can document somebody and get them out for not being able to teach, but just having a bad attitude and not following directions and being late, it's hard to do, but it is possible.
And just to remind them, just as you are expecting your students to meet deadlines, you're holding them accountable for turning in assignments, etc. Accountability is the bottom line. And while we do have this teacher shortage, there's still others who are waiting for your job and willing to work collaboratively with their peers.
But you can teach someone how to teach. If they have a positive attitude and they're willing, you can mold them. But if they're not coming to work on time, there's a character flaw somewhere that's very hard to change.
They're not committed to this job.
Thank you.
And I would just say, as a principal, you're not in it by yourself either. I mean, you're going to be doing some things at the building level, but then you've got the central office that you can call. So you don't need to be going out on your own like a little road, just doing. If you're at the point where you're thinking, I want to go from a individual plan to a monitored plan, you pick up the phone, call HR, talk to the person, share with them, this is what I've done so far to support, this is what I've done so far to have conversations. I'm feeling I'm at the point that I'm wanting to move on to the next step and make sure that you have that voice at the district level in HR saying, it sounds like you've covered your bases, proceed forward. Because you never want to go out on a limb and start moving too fast and then next you know you don't have things in place, and in the end, it's gonna undermine you with the teacher. And in best case scenarios, you really do want to make sure the support's there as well as the conversations. But we end up calling central office when we start moving to individual to monitor and beyond to make sure that we're all on the same page and seeing things the same way.
I also want to add that for cases like that, you need to address those timely, because it has an impact on the school culture. And that's very important. Culture and your environment that you're working in, you need to model your expectations. And you can't let, it goes back to the old saying, spoiled apple can ruin a whole bushel.
And I actually had a conversation with an administrator, a new administrator yesterday, and I said there's two things that can cause you to lose your job. And you know, one instructional and one is cultural. Cultural is a fast track.
Yeah.
Instructional, it kind of comes in bits and pieces over time, but if you lose that culture, then you pretty much have lost your respect with that group, and you may end up affecting your job because you haven't done exactly what she's talking about, because that culture, that apple, it spoils very quickly, especially in hot weather like this.
Yes. In Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And to go along the same lines, but, you know, switching tracks just a little bit, still in human resources. These are expiring school executives. And there are some of them that are wanting to know that what if their principal is not taking them through the evaluation process and giving them feedback on how they can grow and develop and prepare for a principalship? What are they to do?
I would say that if your principal is not following through, the principal is not only is not the sole person responsible for leadership and in the school. So rely on your colleagues to work with you. You can easily make arrangements to have someone come and observe you, and likewise, your peers getting involved and aligning your professional development plan to meet the specific needs of yours as far as aspiring. And there are, whether you're in a large district or a small district, you can find collaborative groups that you can have conversations and discussions with to provide you with those hands-on practical strategies that you should implement as you are aspiring for an administrative position, and bounce ideas off of them, make arrangements with them to work with you as well.
Because even this group that's right here, even if you are in different places, you can still bounce out ideas off of each other. And eventually when that happens, when we know we have an administrator that's not quite the trainer that we wanted them to be, it also falls the responsibility of the district to do some training too. Exactly, to work on that. But we know, because we talk, that there's some people that are not quite where they need to be as far as training you, because our goal of having principals with assistant principals, you are an assistant principal, that you learn how to be an administrator. And if they're not doing their job, then we will find that out too, but we also take on responsibility to do whole group trainings, because we know some principals with, like this year, there's been so much change that we know there are a lot of things that everybody, you know, probably missed the boat on, including myself. Because there's been changes in everything that we're doing. Every single element of school has changed this past year, but we're all in it together. So we know that we have to have the responsibility too, if we have administrators that are not doing what they need to do.
I just want to add, definitely agree with them, but I do think personally, I think it's evidence here that you guys are lifelong learners and wanting to grow and develop. It is very important, it always has been for me, to have a personal mentor, whether it's the person in your building, the principal that you're working for, or someone else in your district that, you know, is a high flyer or whatever, to make contact, to even ask if you can come sit and talk with them. Most true leaders want to develop people. You know, as the principal, it was very important to me that my assistant principals become principals, because I wanted them to be great, but also it was a good reflection on me. I mean, I'm not even gonna lie about that. But so when you go and meet with a truly high-flying principal, you're gonna find people that will take the time to talk to you, who will invest in your success, because that's what true leaders do. they build the people that are beneath them to go even further than they are. So find that mentor that you can, not just for this year, but for your career, that you can just develop that relationship with. You know, I've had a handful, and I promise you I wouldn't be as successful as or lucky as I've been if I didn't have them.
And one thing that we encourage, I have a very high-flying assistant principal that's had some years of experience and wanted to do something different. So what I encouraged her with my support and the support of her principal, they developed PLCs because we had a lot of new APs. APs don't know about coming in new bus routes. You may think, okay, the yellow bus rides, and it's not that easy. So we took our veteran APs and made a group that wanted to know more about bus routes. We had a group that wanted to know more about curriculum. And people that really felt strong in those areas, they built their own PLCs and came out with some good products that we use this year in our teacher recruitment process.
Under the same standard for human resources leadership, there's kind of two questions I've been combined, but they were wanting to know some ideas about how you recruit, support, develop, and retain high-performing teachers within the school or within the district. What are some of those things that you're trying to do to make sure that you can support and retain teachers as well as recruit them?
The one thing, offer money. I'm just gonna be, we're in Vegas, right?
We're in Vegas.
We know money does make a difference. It's not the selling factor to keep somebody there, but it will help get them there. Once they're there, it's the responsibility of those administrators and the teachers and everybody in that community of the school to keep them there. But one thing that we're doing, we find out word of mouth works. If the teachers in the building are feeling good, they will tell their friends, yo, we have an opening. You need to come to our school. We have a 5th grade opening. I know you taught 5th grade. You're tired of driving 25 miles. Come to our school. Or we're doing some exciting things in our building. Your website, your Twitter, Facebook, all those things out there that half of them I don't know what they are, that people advertise on social media. And I know there was a question about social media. You need to know social media. If you do not have access to Facebook, even though that's not your thing, you need to learn how to get on there. You'll find some interesting things that they have went on in Vegas that you didn't know about that may be important to you. But your teachers will recruit for you, and how you respond to your staff members is a recruitment tool within itself. People will want to come and work with you if they, number one, know you're going to take care of them, you're going to let them teach, and you're going to respect them and empower them.
I also want to add, you know, a lot of times when the question had to do with high-flying teachers, a lot of folks will think, well, let's get this high flyer in here and then let them just do their thing. Well, if you read any research about level 5 teachers, which is your highest level of teacher you can have, one of the things that they say they leave for is lack of feedback. Your high-flying teachers want you in their rooms. They want you giving feedback. They want you reinforcing the things they're doing wrong and giving them points and hints on how to get better. Your highest level teachers are, just like you guys are, lifelong learners. And if you just put them off in that room and say, take these children and go for it, they will leave in a year or two. So, you know, we spend, and I know that in your schoolwork and things like that, you've heard about how principals and building leaders can spend so much of their time with your low-performing teachers. And I challenge you not to do that. I challenge you to use your time with those level 4 and level 5 teachers, because if you build your level 4 and your level 5 teachers to be the best of the best, their data will make up for any low people you have on your roster a whole lot more than if you take those low folks and try to rise them, okay? You raise them. The other thing about it is, when you think, the research talks about, and this is Mike Rutherford's research, he talks about the fact that when you build on a teacher's strengths, so your high-level teachers, when you build on their strengths, they are currently only working at 50% capacity. So you can build those level 4 and level 5 teachers a whole other 50%. Your low-level teachers that are in your buildings right now are working at 85% of their capacity. They're working at closer to their max out than your level 4 and your level 5. If you spend 90% of your time trying to get that extra 15% out of them, you're wasting your time. So how you retain folks is focusing on your level 4 and level 5 teachers. It will improve your data, it will improve your morale. Those great people will stick around. And the other thing that happens, that since we're in Vegas, I'm gonna say it. Pretty soon, the teachers who aren't level 4 and level 5 teachers, they're going, oh, I don't look like that. I don't sound like that. I better get out and go somewhere else before they figure it out. So the situation kind of almost takes care of itself. But, you know, as a beginning administrator, it's going to be very easy to try to spend your time to be sucked in to what I call the dark places in your building. Don't do there. Don't go there. Spend your places with the high-end folks, and it will truly make your data rich.
Now, their comments focus a lot on retaining. I want to touch on just a little bit of recruitment. And when you are involved with recruiting staff, now, while the HR person may participate, one of the fortunate opportunities that I had in some previous school districts that I worked with is having the opportunity to accompany the HR person or going as a group of administrators to recruit teachers. The biggest thing is you need to know what's going on in your district, not only at the level which you serve, but across your district, district-wide. What makes you competitive? What do you have to offer that the neighboring county does not have to offer? Money's always good to have those signing bonuses, but as an end result, collectively, if you can talk about your thriving culture, if you can talk about the opportunities that you are providing for your students and preparing them from pre-K to 12th grade to be college and career ready and ready for a global society, what do you have to offer? And you need to be able to sell it. Because, you know, and that was something too that we were strategic about. If because a lot of times when we are going to recruitment fairs, you have the larger district who has all of this stuff, and everybody wants to go to Pitt County. But you may have
Everybody wants to go to Wade.
yeah, they want to go to Wake. They want to go to Wake, and Wake and Weldon right beside each other. So who wants to come to little old Weldon? Yes, he is. But that makes a difference. You have to sell yourself. So being strategic about who participates with you, sending pairs.
Yeah.
As principals, we make sure we had those who could be vocal, who were good sellers. When you're trying to sell a car, you have your best salesmen out there on the lot.
That's right.
You have your best people out there recruiting.
And we actually, I don't go on most of the trips. We send our principals out and starting to send teachers out to recruiting. They sign up for schools that they may want to go to. We have now been able to go to other states because we recognize that we're like crabs in a bucket in North Carolina competing for the same people. So we're starting to venture out to some other states too. But that is a very good point. Your sellers need to be on your recruitment list and going to your fairs. Because I can sell, but I can only go one place when there are other things going on. So that's a very good point.
Ready to move on to the next one?
We are, okay. Let's move on from cultural leadership because it kind of came up already in the information you were sharing there. But when you think of staff morale, when you go in and you see those high flyer school executives, when you think of that school culture standard, what are those school executives doing to make sure that that culture is a place that the students are doing well, the staff's happy? You know, what's the magic in creating that culture, and what are you seeing in terms of best practices for staff morale, especially with all the political things that are going on currently in our state?
I think one thing that I talk to new executives about, there's two things you need to do. You need to ask and you need to listen. If you can do those two things, we can get you where you want to be. Because ask when you don't know something. It's okay as a school executive to say sometimes, I don't know, but follow it up with, let me get back to you. Because you can't know everything. And if you're going to ask, somebody asks you something and you keep saying, I don't know, they're going to figure out you really don't know. And if someone before you, that professional mentor or the principal or somebody in the community is saying something to you or bringing something to you, you really need to actively listen to what they're saying. They may not have the whole thing correct, but something in what the problem is or the issue or the concern is true. And that's the part you need to focus on, because you want your total school culture. And sometimes as an administrator, you have to fall on the sword. You're the one, you're just like, okay, I did it. Even though sometimes I get responsible, I'm responsible for a whole lot of stuff I didn't do. But if it's in my department and it's one of my administrators, okay, I did it, I'm gonna help them out, this is my plan. Because you have to do that sometimes, even though you don't want to, because that shows, number one, that you're human, number two, you make mistakes, number three, you recognize we need to come to a compromise or resolution. So that morale piece, really, everybody's looking at you even when you think they're not. They want to know how you're going to react, and you know people are going to put testers out there, feelers, to see how you're going to respond to that community leader that comes in and says, well, I ran every principal out of here. Okay, how are you today? You know, you have to make sure that you're prepared for stuff like that, because that school culture piece doesn't just involve the people in your school, it involves the people around your school, and you have to know about and realize both groups.
I think it's also important at a school building to have traditions and celebrations, to have an induction process. You know, some of the greatest places I've ever worked, you know, when a teacher would be coming from out of state, we would get together and, you know, what do we have in our houses that we could put in their apartment for, you know, they didn't have a dining room, you know, little things like that. But to have an induction process when new people are coming, who's going to take the leadership of making them feel welcome, you know, being willing to be out, I mean, as a principal, you're going to be outside that 8 to 5 hours, we all know that. But like, you know, you have all of these new teachers that may be coming to a new town who don't have anybody. Well, you know what, how about we go to dinner on Saturday night? Because you know that they're going to be all by themselves for the weekend. You know, so with your staff members, it's really about being a collective family. So for instance, at one of the schools I work, we had lots of brand new teachers. So even though I have my own family, you know, we would organize to where they would go to one person's house for Thanksgiving. We would all help financially with making sure that their Thanksgiving dinner and their Christmas, that they had what they need, but the new folks would come together, maybe some people that had been around, you know what I mean? So that you know that they know that you are their resource. They have mom or dad up in New York and, you know, all of those other places, but that in our town we are collectively together, and we are not going to let you fall. We are invested in you. With regards to students and parents, particularly parents, not requiring them to come to the school building, not requiring them to come to you is huge. You know, we had lots of time financially, parents just getting to you was very hard. And so, you know, being willing to say, you know, come to see me, you can't make it, I will come to see you. One school, it was so amazing. We would say, let's say, pick a grade level, and so this month might be 3rd grade, and we collectively as a grade level pull out one child who was the most at-risk student that we were most concerned about in 3rd grade. And then collectively, every 3rd grade teacher, myself, my assistant principal, my instructional coach, we would call it, it was basically a dinner, but we would bring the dinner, but we would go to their home. And we would sit at their house, and we would talk to them about their child, and we would, you know, just be like an hour and a half conversation, but people are nervous about coming to school, especially if there's lots of periods where they've not been successful in school. So they would, you know, and sometimes they'll say, well, you know, I'm a little embarrassed about you coming to our house. Okay, we'll go to a neutral location. We would go to a park, or we would go somewhere. We just wouldn't come into the school. And so again, when they begin to realize it's not really about you and me as mom and principal, it's about us collectively. I want your child to be the best child that they can be and to be successful. Word spreads. And all of a sudden, you're not that woman sitting in that office. You're a part of wanting to make their child be great. And that spreads. It spreads.
Did you have anything, Dr. Smith-Wolfler, before we go to the next question?
No.
And
I think I paid my attention on it.
okay, and Cliff has a follow-up question in that area.
You guys talked about new teachers. How do you motivate to get them around when you have a bunch of veteran teachers who are stuck in their ways or are just tired, worn out? I mean, they don't want to do anything, and you know, a new administrator comes in and you can just tell the morale's been down and they, I mean, how do you address?
Well, one thing that I encourage administrators to do, and we do as well, is that, to me, PLCs have brought that process open a little bit, because by nature of their evaluation, they have to participate or they're going to be developing. Now, how it functions is solely dependent on that administrator and what their role is in bringing people together. I just had an administrator that took a group of her teachers to Ron Clark Academy. And that was huge, because this is a young administrator that went into a school with one VT. So everybody was older and veteran. And with that particular situation, she's been able to break the ice. They were on the bus. So 8 hours on a bus, you have to learn how to deal with somebody. And so it was interesting that some of the veteran teachers there said, we think that you don't like us because you pay more attention to the beginning teachers. And that kind of threw her off. And she said, well, no, I do like y'all. I'm always asking y'all to come and do this. And what happens is my beginning teachers are sponges. They're jumping on it and doing it. It's not that I'm asking them. That's what they want. But that conversation made a 360. So then she knew as the administrator, okay, this is what I need to do with this group. And then they knew it's safe. And one veteran teacher said, oh, she's not like that. She will come, she will help you. Her door is always open. So once you get one person, like she said, it spreads. So they were fine. And the last hour of the trip was very pleasant. But it was very eye-opening. But that was an example that just popped in my head, that it's the best way to do it is to have that conversation. Once you can break the ice, then everybody's open. It's not personal. It's about those students. Then you can get some.
And that is key, being strategic about what you decide to break the ice. What's going to be that event that's going to have biggest impact. And once you open that door and you identify some of those veteran teachers who are willing to be the teacher leaders, after you establish the stage, then allow them to take the lead in doing so. Because site-based management, collaboration with PLCs, all of that is necessary to improve teacher morale. And sometimes, just as you may do with students, sometimes you need to have some rap sessions and just actually say, what is it that you feel is broken that we need to fix? And have them a part of developing the solution once you identify, but you can't fix everything all at one time. But if you identify those, and as a collective group in your PLCs, you're figuring out what are going to be the main priorities that you're going to tackle first. Then identify people to start with the facilitation of that process.
Great job, and good follow-up question. I'd like to go to curriculum a little bit. There's some of these aspiring administrators that want to know, what is it that the school executives and you would do as the central service to support teachers better understanding their content and developing curriculum that is rigorous, and you would see this occurring in the classroom? What are some things that you do to help employ that in the classroom?
First of all, I think that there's curriculum-wise, we know that we have state standards set forth for us. I think it's really important that time be spent in PLC meetings, in vertical team meetings, at your school improvement team meetings, talking about curriculum. Because we are lucky right now that it's very much a vertical curriculum. Things are tied together, K-12 very nicely, better than they've ever been before. And so having those conversations and showing them things like the unpacking documents. If your district provides things such as pacing documents, one of the things that's great to have in conversation within your PLCs as you're planning, as you're talking about students is, what's coming up? What is that going to look like? And to backward map. So begin with the end in mind. When our kids are successful at this standard, what will it look like? Well, how do we take that and backward map it, and what timeline will we need in order to, because here's where we're going to start. Having in-depth conversation, and the other component of that is doesn't always, as an administrator, need to be you doing the talking, because there are some teachers in your building that are better than we will ever be. So taking that teacher that you know by data, is strong in a curriculum standard and saying, you know, Mr. Ellerby, what did you do for your students? How did you present this information? How did you help your struggling kids? How did you help your high-level students? What did you do? And making it a dialogue, because one of the things that has to happen, what we wait for, is for that one teacher to say, can you come do it with my kids? And then you say yes, absolutely, and you know, and so you do all of those things, but curriculum has to come through from the standard, not what we want to teach, and I say that because very often, my kids, oh my God, my kids love reading this book, or my kids love doing this. We read this book, it took us, you know, in high school, it took us 6 weeks to read whatever book, and now we're gonna watch the movie. Well, there's not a standard in high school in most grade levels that it's about one book. It's about multiple, you know, and so you have to be able to have those conversations going, but did that really meet the standard? Are we really going after what we need to go after? And building upon the strengths based on the data that you have in your building.
And I would say in support of that, it's important, the data piece that she's discussing, for everyone to know how to recognize their data. And that is that alignment of teaching, learning, curriculum, instruction, assessment. It has to be a clear vertical alignment, because they're all different components. Even though I'm in HR, I'm learning about Common Core, I'm learning about Read 3D, I'm learning about the Math 1 and the changes in the 3, 4. I put myself in situations so that I can be abreast, because if somebody's coming to me in a situation as far as a teacher having a concern with curriculum, I need to know how to tell them, well, maybe you need to change this particular format and have you assess your data. When I look and see that 85% of your kids failed Math 1 first semester, something's wrong. Something's missing. And they're looking at me, first they're shocked because they don't think I know how to talk like that.
Yeah.
But it's important, because curriculum is what we do. We're there to teach the children. And if something's not happening, that teachers need to know how to take their curriculum, unpack it, look at it standard by standard, see which kids are not mastering it, use the data to support it, and to drive the change in instruction.
Yes, and let me interject there. She made a very valid point of how she's able to talk curriculum even though she specializes in human resources. And I say that because, and I just got through with some interviews with people who were assistant principals that wanted to be principals. And sometimes when you ask them a certain question, they say, well, my principal didn't never let me do anything like that, so I don't know what you do in that. So you're automatically telling that you're not prepared. But she took the initiative to cross and make it relevant to her job. So what I'm saying to you is your responsibility as an AP, aspiring school administrator, to make sure that you know all levels of those leadership standards that we're talking about. And go on, Dr. Woodford.
I really like the way she summed up the CIA. That's something that I hope you didn't miss, but I'm gonna say it again, so you have to, because it's that important with the CIA. Curriculum, unpacking that curriculum, that's foundational to your classroom instruction and determining the best pedagogy. And when you use your assessment, you've got to analyze it to readjust and modify your instruction. So you have to know that teaching and learning, it's a cyclic process. Another thing that was mentioned is feedback. Providing that feedback is key as well. And I really like hearing that Jackson is, even though she's HR, because you know sometimes, especially teachers have phobia about certain people who are coming in the building. Now it's okay for me to come to the building because I'm chief academic officer, okay, well she's responsible for curriculum instruction. But if HR comes in the building, who has done what? What's wrong? You know, you have that mentality.
That's right.
Like HR can't provide support too.
Exactly.
So, and you're modeling those expectations that it's important that any aspect of education, the organizational structure, every one of us need to be centered around curriculum, instruction, assessment.
That's right.
Because at the heart of everything is student learning. So her job, she needs to figure out, and she has, obviously, in her testament, that what she does and how it's connected to student learning, and how she can be of support to our buildings.
And when they put the emphasis on that, okay, we can go home now. But we do have
That is
another,
it.
here's Keith, he has something that he wants to bring up.
Thank you so much for,
Are you gonna hand the mic again?
And I'm going to see Spider-Man this weekend.
His name is Keith Parker.
Parker.
And we all did this thing, and the first thing where we said our names and then the full name. And how did you come about the name? How did your parents name you and stuff? And so we just adopted for him. He really was supposed to be named Peter.
I miss my calling. Superhero world. I guess teaching is its own.
It is.
It is.
It's kind of a question that, and thank you for your answers and conversation so far already. Very insightful pieces here. But this question kind of encompasses the last standard, but also this one. It seems like for a lot of our rural poor schools, where there's high turnover for teachers, but there's also significantly high turnover for administrators. There's so many things that are challenges. So speaking from my own experience in my school, going through some administrative turnover and a lot of things went wrong, we thankfully now have an extremely gifted administrator. I won't call his name, he's on the Pitt County School Board though. But he is a very, very good principal. But when he came into our building 4 years ago, he was the only talented person. He had no AP that could do anything. He had teachers that he had to get rid of. And I kind of look at those 4 years ago and I think, what do you do first? And so I guess my question is, for school executives that are going into these schools, teachers don't respect authority. There's discipline issues in the school. Kids don't stay in the classroom. High quality teaching and learning is not going on. The custodial staff doesn't clean the school. I mean, it's widespread like it is in a lot of areas. What do you do first? Is your priority discipline? Is it, what do you take? Because you can't do everything. You have to be strategic and systematic. What's the most important thing to do in those scenarios? What do you do first?
Well, for me, and from the district level, even from the superintendent on down, we have to be ready to support that principal and give them enough data and give some suggestions as to where to start. Because number one, going into that school, somebody had to tell him about the culture. He had to know what the needs were. And then you play on the strengths of that principal. You put the principal there or the school executive there for a reason. Okay, I learned I was a cleanup person. They put me to heal and clean up, and then somebody came behind me to be that push to, they're ready for the curriculum piece now. I recognize that about me, and I'm fine with that as a leader. But obviously they knew that he possessed something that they needed, and he could figure out which area to pick. But you have to pick your battles. I think somebody questioned about picking your battles. And you have to be strategic in which battle that you pick, because you can pick the wrong one and it could send you down the downward spiral to the fast track of not having a job. So a new principal going in has to kind of observe all entities of the building, because you can't kick all the kids out. But if the district says we want 10 teachers out of that building, they have the district support, 10 teachers will flow, but somebody's there to support them. So it's kind of hard to tell you exactly what to pick for me, because it depends on what's going on in the school, that when you have 5 or 6 things wrong, you have to pick the low-hanging fruit first.
I think one of the first things that I've done in the is to revisit or rewrite or re-look at your vision, mission, and core beliefs. That has to happen one of the first times you stand in front of your staff, so that it sets a tone and it sets a purpose. It doesn't mean that the next day everything's going to change, but it just gives you the arrow which the school is going to go. And then as you begin to clean things up, so you have your vision, your mission, your norms, and we've done it to where the school has it, then every individual classroom has a vision and mission, every student has a vision and mission, so that we're all pointing in the same direction. So you're kind of getting that buy-in piece. And then as you're fixing, for lack of a better word, excuse that word, the discipline and the teacher morale and stuff like that, you reframe it back to what you've agreed upon as your vision and mission. So it's not about Melanie Hanlon coming in here and I don't like you, you gotta go, but this is what we've said we're gonna do. Let's do it. Is this helping or hurting? It's hurting, you gotta get rid of it, let's go. And so it just, you know, and every leader who walks into a building, there's a way to set the vision and mission of the school, and again, this is bigness, where you have people going, oh yeah, you know what I mean? Even though James might be sitting there going, well, no, I don't think it's important that every child read when they leave here. He might be saying that, but he's not gonna publicly go, well, that's dumb. You know, because that's what schools do. You know, so there's a way to do that to where you get them going off in the right direction. And then what you have to do is every major decision you make that first year has to be so directly aligned back to what you've agreed upon that it's a no-brainer.
And that feedback portion that she's talking about, it's got to be constant. And also, feedback is so important. Yes.
Vanessa,
What we did was reculturing of the school, that's what we're talking about. And essentially, we went through that. I'm new to the school system, however, a lot of the people that were already there have been there for years, and they have constantly lost principals. So we have both NELA cohorts there now, principal, assistant principal, and they had to do some reculturing type of things. And one of the things that we did at the end of the year is, like, we would have the students, when we were teaching, buy into consequences and choices.
Absolutely.
And we did the same thing for our mission statement, and he went by different groups. Okay, what do you really think our mission statement should be? And so collaboratively,
Absolutely.
we developed that mission statement in our vision, so we're on one accord.
Absolutely.
So at the beginning of the year, even some of our buy-ins for punishment for students, behavioral issues, we are all on one accord, so there's no one who can say that, you know, I don't agree with that, because you had the opportunity to have your input, and they made the input vital. You know, they made you important.
Yeah, you would never create a vision and mission statement or by yourself. I apologize if I wasn't clear. You would always, always, always do it exactly like that, collaboratively. You have to be transparent. And I like what you talked about with consequences. I worked in a very impoverished urban setting, and one of the things about if you work with poor children, safety is a big thing for them. They might sleep in 6 different beds at night during the course of the week, or in their car or whatever. So it is important for children to know if I make a mistake, or if I choose even to do something bad, I know what the consequence is. I mean, I've had kids look at me and go, Miss H, I knew that if I punched him, I was going to get 5 days. It was worth it. I'm okay with that. Because that was a choice, and we have to teach kids how to make better choices, and that was a learning opportunity. But if you ever work with a lot of poor children, they have to know the consequences for their behavior. Have to.
Go ahead, Carol.
On the flip side of that, being that we're at the same school, what do you do? Because when I came in, and I've been there for 14, 15 years, and I'll still, now that we have our new administrator, I don't hear it as much, but for the first 10 years, I heard, well, that's not how it would be if so-and-so were still here. 20 years later, and we still have that same excellent administrator. What we're facing, because we know our administrator's aspiring, when we lose him, one of us might end up having to fill those big shoes. What do you do to fill those shoes? If you're down, there's really nowhere else to go but up. But when you have vacated or moving into a vacated position, that's strong.
Well, one thing I always did, because I followed some great legends, is I said, okay, let's talk about that. I really don't look like them. There's some things about them that I admire, and I just had to face it head on. So once I started talking about, I recognized that I'm not Mr. Such and Such, and owned it, because I'm going to hear it anyway. After a couple months, it kind of died off, because they already, you know what, I was getting ready to say that's how we did it, but I'm going to let it go. And here's, what about this idea? And because if the administrator doesn't acknowledge it, then they're going to think that back to the traditions and the beliefs and values that some of them live on and function on, they're going to think you don't care about them. So going into those schools that had those legendary people that were there for 25 years, that you acknowledge them. If they put the trophy up and their face is on the wall, do not touch that trophy or or you will not survive. You will be in the news within an hour, I guarantee you. But acknowledge it, and you have to embrace it and say, okay, let's take the things that that person had that went well, and let's build upon it, you know.
What, absolutely, and I followed, my first principalship, I followed an amazing principal. I was her assistant principal, she was the principal, and I became after she left. Thankfully, over the years, the 2 years that I was her assistant principal, we had a unified vision and mission. And so we had had lots of conversation about, and almost we had kind of like a succession plan. So if she had been there after, if she had continued on, what were we going to do? And so when she went on a different road and I became, we were still seamless in what we were going to do. Everybody's personality is different, so it becomes your personality, but don't get off the track of excellence. You know, that would be crazy. The other thing that some folks do when they become new principals, and it is a challenge, everybody wants to be the boss. You know, what I've seen people who have the potential to be great administrators do is, in order to seem great, they undermine the people that came before them, whether they were good, bad, ugly, whatever. And write it down in all caps. Honor the people before you.
Yes.
Regardless of what you feel on the inside, if you don't, you thought, oh my God, that was a dumb decision they were making. You go home and you talk about that with your spouse. But in front of your staff and in front of the community and in front of everybody else, no matter if they were mediocre, bad, good, whatever, you honor who came before you and you talk as if you're building on what was already there.
That's right.
You cannot, the only person you're tearing down by tearing down people before you is your reputation.
Yeah. Very good point. All right, Nicole, we'll go to the next question.
Kind of going along with some of the strategic leadership, we talked a lot about vision and missions and having all people buying into that. But what do you do when you have several staff members that are not joining in with teacher leadership? How do you create opportunities for teachers to willingly accept leadership opportunities in the building and try to get away from that your volunteer, situation?
You cannot do it in isolation as the leader. You're going to, which is one of your strategies, is picking those who have good rapport among their peers and allow them to take the lead in pulling their colleagues along. And also too, you can be strategic about going through PLCs, for example. If you've identified your school improvement priorities that you want to focus on for this year, then after you model and establish your expectations, after that, you should allow your teachers to take over. And to say, okay, when you're going to form groups, everybody in this school is going to be in charge of a PLC by the end of the year. That's that expectation. Who goes first, how you go about it, and what the topic is. Because also you have to recognize not everyone is comfortable in that role as well. So we have to step out of our comfort zones, but at the same time we have to acknowledge that they're there and meet them, allow them to participate when it's most comfortable for them. And remind them that we're here to support each other. We're doing no different than when we ask students to do presentations in our classrooms. And a lot of times with teachers who are unwilling, I guess they make the connections easier when you can connect it to what their life is day in and day out in the classroom. How can I establish those connections, give the relationships at the various levels?
Great. Okay, now, I want you to think a minute here about some things that have already stood out to you and begin to share this with the panel in case there's other points that you want to bring out for me. So anybody can go first, some things that have stood out for you and things that you will probably want to follow up with? Because I see you all taking lots of notes and everything, and you've already asked some good questions. So give you a chance to reflect a little bit. Go ahead, Billy.
For me, and I've heard a recurring theme, and maybe it's just because of the line of questioning, but just the importance of establishing the school culture and how vital that is in all aspects of the school executive role. To me, that just seems to be the resounding thing in almost every issue, that as long as the culture's been established, then it kind of takes care of itself in the other avenues.
You're right. You're right. And, you know, when they were talking about this school culture and stuff, I couldn't help but to reflect back when I was there and all the things that you did and stuff, and they were exactly right. You starting, you know, with the vision and the mission, and getting those shared belief. You know, you got to talk about values and belief, because you got to get everybody in the same common language first, and the same mindset as we talked about before. So very good point, Billy. Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead, Sylvia.
And along with what Billy said, one thing that just really stood out for me was honoring the people before you, regardless of the job that they've done, because that's part of the culture, what we're moving into or what we're moving away from, and just honoring that culture and moving forward, and you know, just honoring the people honors the culture, and then we can move forward. So you know, we're not just saying, okay, that phase is over, we're just moving into a different role in a different chapter.
And I agree with you, because I like to even point further. When you start tearing down that leader before you, all you're doing is just causing another nail to go in your coffin, because they're already looking at, okay, you're not as competent and all of that kind of stuff, because you got to put somebody under the bus in order to make yourself look better. And people do that, so let that be a clear indication that's what's occurring. Okay, this young lady, no, go
I just
ahead. I'm
wanted
sorry.
to make a comment, because culture definitely is key, but having that collaborative culture, because as educators, we have to move beyond that this job you can do it in isolation. I mean, it's just this, I've learned some things just being part of this panel and listening to you and answering and responding to your questions, but you can always gather ideas from one another. So don't feel like you have to make a decision on your own either when you're in an administrative role. Even because you make decisions. I mean, many times you walk to your neighbor's classroom and you say, what do you think about doing this activity? It doesn't stop when you're moving to different levels. I have, I'm going to have Jackson's before I leave. But I already have, you know, I have my speed dial of people in my phone because I know I'm going to need to call in my new role as superintendent. So I know I'm going to need to pick the phone and call some people, put out some ideas.
Wouldn't you say that most often you don't want to make a decision by yourself?
No.
Right. The only decisions that I would suggest that you make by yourself is one in which time is of the essence. Like the superintendent called you and she needs to know right now what is the answer to this question. Other than that, it is in your best interest not to make a decision by yourself.
And when it said by yourself, that means you might have to say it by yourself, but you've collaborated behind the scenes with lots of different people. So when you say it, you are the one person saying it, but you've bounced it off many different people.
Janae, tell the panel how you came up with the name Janae. This is a Vegas story.
Oh, okay.
So my real name is Ashley, but my parents, when they were deciding what to name me, I don't know, my dad said there was a song out at the time that had the, title Janae, or had the lyrics about Janae. So my mom and dad went back and forth between that, but then they just settled on Ashley. I guess we're just a normal name. So Dr. Olivia loves calling me that.
So can't y'all read through that?
Absolutely.
Like they said, But go on with your.
The point that really resonated to me was the point about your level 4 and your level 5 teachers. I had never considered that at all, because I think in my head I was like, oh well, you're bringing them in, and that in my head I would think you're empowering them by saying I don't need to be around. But that just was really startling, like the capacity at which the teachers are working. Because when I think about my school, I can see that happening at times, because a lot of our veteran teachers are sensing that, because we have a lot of new teachers that come in very quickly, and we spend our time kind of making their learning curve very expedited, but then myself, having been at the school, like this is my 3rd year, felt not as developed, as pushed as I would have liked, and so that was a really powerful statement to think about.
The point that resonated most with me was when Dr. Hamlin talked about actually going to the homes of students. I think so. I'm constantly going to people and just thinking, how do we get the community more involved? And they're like, oh, let's have a math night, or let's do this or this or this, and it's always at the school. So that idea of bringing it to the parents and the kids at their homes just seems so important to me. Thank you.
Yeah. And you might have to do it sometimes and hold your breath while you're there. And I had to breathe through my mouth, you know, but I went.
You learn so much. You learn so much. And the positive is that you learn truly that regardless of the presumptions you may have made about that family, 99.9% of the time, it may look different than what you want it to look like, but they love their children.
Yes.
To the very, very best of their ability. And sometimes you don't feel that until you're sitting on their rickety couch that's right. Held up by the books under the leg to make it even. But it gives you it taught me to respect all types of individuals and how they show and demonstrate love to their child.
I loved everything, but I think this is so applicable for us now. The curriculum and the planning and the unpacking and the vertical alignment, I just feel like it's so essential. And then starting back with the end in mind, that just pulls it all together. I think in order for us to look at, creating an atmosphere of great learning, global learning for our students, it's essential that we do that. That's great.
Anyone else that have a comment? No.
You've been cut off.
Oh yeah, they're sticking me up there, that's right.
You love to talk as much as I do.
It's coming out.
We are in Vegas.
But thank you again. In regards to this cultural piece, a question that I had in follow-up to the comments that Sylvia made was, in Eastern North Carolina, I think the thing we've seen in our school now is our discipline is solid. We've made a lot of repairs from where we were, but it is just so difficult to move kids culturally to an acceptance of high expectations in the midst of the opposite. And we have no new buildings in our county. I mean, our roof will probably fall in the next year. Our kids come to our school and they know they're poor, and they know our district is poor. And that doesn't mean that good teaching and learning doesn't take place, but it's ingrained in our students, particularly in Eastern North Carolina and poverty. We don't have the school building. Our buildings don't look like Wake County's buildings, and we don't have it. And our kids know that. So how do you change that, and how do you make us? It's not an easy answer. I'm giving you a hard question, but how do you begin to make students feel like just because we are out here and we have limited funds, that we can be just as good as Wake County and Orange County? What's the first step in that process?
I think that a lot of schools have done, because you're correct. I mean, I'm from Hyde County, which is more rural than majority of the year, lots of land and people. Hyde County, which is Beaufort.
Bunch of bears.
Bunch of bears. Lions and tigers and mosquitoes that are biggest. But student leadership, I think, is key in places where people feel like they don't have any hope. The kids draw their parents. So once you teach kids how to have ownership, a lot of our schools are doing 7 habits for effective teens. That has been productive because the kids are taking on roles of leadership. They start going out and doing service projects. It connects them to different agencies, even if it's just the welding company that's there. They assume leadership, which in turn starts filtering out, because then they start mentoring the kids that are below them. If you can get the kids to be leaders and see the need and take ownership of their school, that's where you kind of get rid of that apathy. And it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time, but it can be done.
Yeah, and to add to that, one of the things that may be happening in your school is, I remember having conversations with my students, and they were asking me, how did you become a principal? And so I was talking about how to go to college and all the things that I had to do. And what I learned, you ever have those moments as an educator that you will, I mean, I remember where I was at, where I was sitting, what I was wearing, who the kids were in front of me, because at that moment the child said to me, well, what does college look like? They had no visual representation of life other than their neighborhood, their trailer park. And so one of the things that we started to try to help out with that is, you know, you want that, how do we know what we're gonna be, get a dream? Well, if they don't have a picture of what that dream is, you have to give it to them. So we started taking, not just our older kids, but all of our kids, we'd go on field trips to different colleges. At the beginning of every year, we talk about we brainstorm, what are some things you've never done before but you want to do? And so one of them talked about they'd never been to a restaurant. So periodically, when they would achieve certain goals, that we set certain academic goals as a class, not as individual students, but as a class, they'd achieve certain goals, then we would pull something out of the hat. And so like one day, I called up Olive Garden, and I was like, I have a group of kids, they've done this and that, they've never been to a restaurant before. They closed down Olive Garden, brought them in, took them through the kitchen, they served them, they did, you know, and so what you do, all of those things that she absolutely talked about, but also getting them out, doing those learning excursions, and you can find people who will donate. There's a lot of Title I money that you can leave if you're a impoverished school that you can have to do these kinds of things, but giving them a picture of what that would look like outside of the neighborhood is huge. Because, you know, I wanted to be, what are we? We are the product of our parents. Well, if mom and dad don't see beyond McDonald's, because they're working their tail off, or they're at the hotel and they're working, they don't have a picture to reach for. You gotta give them a picture.
I just want to know what Olive Garden that was, because I'm gonna call and say that I have a bunch of aspiring students. They never been to a restaurant before, and they look hungry. I'm gonna say hungry.
It was the Olive Garden in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
I would know to say too, I had the luxury after 13 years of administrative experience to open up a brand new school with middle school students for an early college, minors. And of course you have community college at that time who weren't too keen about teaching high school students. You bring some middle school students in the college class.
Wow.
So we had struggles, but you know, one of the key there is letting your students know you care about their future. You care about what they're going to do after high school and life with you, and you let them know if we set our minds to it, we can do it. And don't let anybody sell you short or tell you that you cannot do it. This is what we will do. And they have to be a part of, just as you make your teachers a part of your school governance, your students have to be a part of your school governance. And know that they're in this together, they have that ownership, they are responsible for also making this happen too. And just like going into the restaurant, we actually it's only 2 students out of 64 that had ever been to Washington, D.C. And none of them had rode the Metro. That was a dynamite trip. And they still talk about that trip. We graduated our first class this year, and that was a memorable event for them. So when you can expose them and provide them with opportunities, and service learning goes a long ways as well, because we require them to be a part of the community. If you are important, everything we do is for our youth. Make sure that you're educating your community why it is important to invest in them.
And I say with Dr. Smith, Wilther, too, it's so important to give it into the community because your board members are listening to your community. And a lot of times when you bring up, we want to take the kids to so-and-so, the board members have to approve it. And they have to see the connection, the relevance in taking them out. So that's why you've got to be great PR agents too, to inform the parents in the community of what's going on so that when the information does get to the board members, then the board members are already abreast to say, oh yeah, I'm going to approve that because this links to that. Okay? because I see it on my side, or they taking another field trip, and you know, you can see the relevance
And
in
you know where
it,
he is, right?
but you gotta do the legwork to make sure you expose them. Yeah.
Got it. And I just said, we know where you are, right?
Yes, anyone else though, but I've seen several boards, I'm not just one board. Anyone else? I see you, you about to jump out at me.
I'm not.
Yes, you
talking
are.
about me?
Yes,
I just have a question.
yes.
It doesn't have anything, I mean, it's,
I told you I saw it, go on.
so as a, I think this is one of our bigger concerns with the, us young folk. I mean, real young folk. We come in and, Miss Slaker is only in her 20s, and she's coming in as a school executive, thinking she's some big shot. How do we make it so that it's?
Melanie can tell you.
I became an assistant principal when I was, I think I was 28 and had 4 years of experience as a teacher. Okay, so I'm on the same. So with a lot of the people that I obviously taught were, that I was working with were older than me. One of the first things I did is, and I did this purposefully, and I had to talk the principal into allowing me to do that, but I did my assistant principalship half-time. I spent half-time doing assistant principal stuff, and I spent my morning half of my day teaching. And I took 3rd grade, tested area at the time, and I taught reading and math. Didn't have to do it that way, but I did it that way because I wanted them to understand that I can teach. I'm here, I'm those kind of things. But if I had not done it that way, one of the things I did all of my career as an administrator is we are all teachers. To this day, I'm in curriculum instruction, but if I learned something new, I did it last week at school, I will go to a teacher and say, you know what, I learned something, I've been reading about this, can I borrow your kids? And I want to teach this class. And I'm not going to pick random standards, I'm going to say, what are you teaching? And then I'm going to try, and I model teaching, I am in a classroom teaching every single week to this day. So it's not about me saying, this is what you need to fix, this is what you need to fix. It's about, I want to model myself as a lifelong learner, and I did not come to the central office to get away from teaching. I did not become an assistant principal to get away from teaching. I left teaching because I wanted to have a bigger influence. And so I love kids. People, I've heard said, what do you do for a living? I'll say, I'm a teacher, and other people will go, what do you mean you're a teacher? I will always be a teacher. Yeah. And so you have to be, if you're young and you're going to be over older people, great people, awesome teachers, they have to see you doing the art of teaching.
And
they have to see your feet in the fire with them.
And you can do that as an administrator.
Absolutely.
Because when you expect your teachers to be teacher-centered, student-centered, you're also teacher-centered. And yes, they're going to view you as young, but you keep that you maintain, even though you may not feel as if you are as confident inside, act like it. Keep your poker face, poker face, and
Outside of that, you still keep your poker face.
that's right. And never let them see you sweat. So you can be screaming inside, but you don't have to have that demeanor as if you're a deer in headlights, or you're spastic, or whatever.
You call your friend and cry to them.
Exactly.
But then you go back, suck it up, wipe your face, and go, do what you have to do. But
and I'll even say the truth. There have been times that I've been modeling a lesson, throughout my career, and in front of people I'm supervising, and it's bombed. Truly. And so that what do I do? I do the same thing that a teacher would do, or anybody else would do. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to come back tomorrow, I'm going to try that again. They have to see that when you mess up or things aren't 110% perfect, that you're just like them. That I'm not going to give up, let me come back, I'm going to rethink that, I'm going to come back, I'm going to do it again. And it's modeling the expectation. They have to see you as one of them.
That's pretty good. And since we're there, how do y'all feel about an administrator or a school executive who aspires to be a school executive but never taught in the classroom? How do you feel about somebody going forward that way?
if you've never taught in a classroom, and we're responsible, all of us are responsible for student learning, then you make sure you develop those opportunities, find those opportunities to get in the classrooms. Because you can team teach. You may not have a classroom by yourself, but you can work with teachers, you can roll your sleeves up, and you can help plan with them. You can plan lessons. You can actually carry out those lessons. So, because it is crucial that you model your expectations. And it's the same thing with administrators, because a lot of times you can have central office people who say, well, she was never a principal or assistant principal. I just
Have to learn.
You know,
I
tell
mean,
you what to do.
you have to use the skills that you have and capitalize on it. If you were only somebody that was a media coordinator and you've never taught, but that's teaching. Even if you were a counselor, you taught kids, you had guidance classes, so you emphasize on the things that you have done, because it's about children. Regardless of what we do, at the end of the day, it is about somebody's child, and being able to do
I
that.
do think it's important, though, that if you haven't had that classroom experience, that even though you're sitting in an administrative position, that they see you as the learner. That you use that first 2 years to become a great teacher. Don't say, okay, yeah, I was never a teacher, and then 15 years later, I shoulda, woulda, coulda. Your people will follow you to the ends of the earth if they see you as a learner. So, I'd be teaching. I would be out there, I'd be finding that great person, I'd have even if somebody on your staff is, you're supervising, they can be your mentor in helping you learn to teach. People will respect you. I think all of us would say that when we became administrators, or even teachers, there's things that we're naturally good at, and there's things that we're naturally not good at. They have to see you as developing the things that you're not good at.
We have a question or a comment here.
So, as a new school executive, how do you begin to invest your staff in your why? We're not only investing, we're getting them to believe in your why, especially if you haven't had any previous experience. So so not only believing in what we do, but why we do.
You have to figure out those connections. Always be cognizant and looking for the connections of what you're doing to why you're doing it, showing that correlation. An example of, sometimes you can implement a new practice and you're going to have resistance along the way. Even with that, a lot of times your data can speak for itself. At being able to explain why it is purposeful and meaningful. And yes, this is no different than your students when you're trying to teach them and they're asking, why do I need to learn this? So what of it? You need to figure out how to make it relevant. And sometimes you can't find those ideas out on your own. That's why you need to have opportunities to talk with colleagues so that they can help you come to those connections and realizations that you can make.
You get it from the perception of it from being your why to our why.
Right.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing. If it's just your why, to be real honest, I don't really care about your why. You have to make me want your why to be my why.
And you have to find those people that do have your why and put them out as filters, because they're gonna help that become our why.
Very good. Now, let me ask this. Have any of you ever had to transition from the classroom to the administration?
Yes.
I know you did. You said yes.
I did it.
That's a dumb question.
I did it in the middle of the year.
Yeah, it's good. Okay. And so tell us how
Okay.
you did this.
Well, one thing, as I was the type of person I wanted to learn things new, and of course I went back to school. I was not offered a job at the beginning of that year. All my friends were. I was like, okay, whatever, and went back into the classroom. I was hurt. I'm not gonna say I wasn't, and everybody's always surprised. I can't imagine that, but it did happen to me. And I applied for a job at Edgecombe County, and I just did. I said, I'm gonna apply, and I went for the interview, and I got it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to leave my 27 fifth grade babies. to me, that was the hardest thing. It wasn't being scared about going to the assistant principalship. It was that I had to leave them, but I had to go back and say, but I've made an impact on them. I've done it for 7 years. I've changed parents' perception of life and me. I want to have that big picture. So I went into the school. It was a very tough situation, but I just sat back and I learned. And that particular year, I followed what my principal did because I was new to the area. I didn't live. I lived in Greenville. Was going to Battleboro, North Carolina. Yeah, yes. And it was different for me. But I learned and I listened, and I had to just sit back. But that transition, the hardest thing was leaving my kids and recognizing that, okay, I'm still going to be a teacher, but is it okay for me to use some of my teacher strategies and build upon them to be an administrator? Once I figured out how to do that, the wheels started turning. Because at first, I didn't know what to do. Even though I had been trained, and there were some pages in the textbook that tell me what I was supposed to do, when you hit that door, you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I just had to call on colleagues that were already administrators and just kind of felt my way, but I took it slow. I didn't go in there saying, I'm the assistant principal, and you're going to do what I say. And I taught some classes. I did teach classes. When the sub wasn't there, I was a teacher.
Okay, good. Anybody else want to comment before we?
I never wanted to be a principal.
Nor superintendent.
Wow. And each time I've said I'm never going to do that. I got my MAED degree. I started it in my second year as a teacher. So in 3 years, carpooling back and forth, we were actually in the same MAED program. And I wanted to earn my administrative degree, but I have my curriculum and instruction supervision licensure, so I wanted to be a support to teachers. And only saw that as being maybe a curriculum math science supervisor. And during that time, for my very first summer of teaching, I started, that was when graphics calculators first came out. And when I did my student teaching, I learned to use it. And then quickly, as first year teacher, started teaching other teachers, doing a multitude of workshops within the county, but also across the state. So that's what I wanted to do. And my mentor who pushed me, because I was also not going to major in MAED, I was going to get my master's. He said, why are you going to do that? You already know the math and master's. You don't need a master's in that. You never know what you might want to do. 30 years is a long time to be in education. So, and he was finishing up his advanced degree. So we went together, and he made me put in applications. I said, no, I'll wait, a couple years down the road, I'll put in applications. No, you're going to now. At least it'll be an experience for you. And one of my interviews, I actually wasn't going to put it in that school system because I said, no, they're not going to hire me. I mean, they're too traditional of a school system. And I'm young, so I'm sure they're probably going to think I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, but when I went for that interview, there were 2 teachers in there who were involved in 2 math professional development sessions that I had done within that last 3 years. And so I was comforted seeing them. But afterwards, when I was hired, the principal said, oh my gosh, they didn't want to interview anybody else after interviewing you, because they said, we have seen her teach and she's taught us how to do this. This is who we need. This is what we need. So never wanted to be a principal, wanted to be an instructor of teachers. But that is what you do as building level school executives. And that summer, in getting ready for my first assistant principalship, that aha came as I started thinking about and getting excited about all the things that I could do within that school building. And then within a year and a half, became principal, because I thought that was going to be a long time down the road, but my principal decided he was going to retire. And my assistant principal buddy, who had been there for 13 years, wasn't willing to take it. So once again, somebody else, and this time it was the teachers encouraging me to do it. And each step along the way I have had, and it goes back to me saying, a lot of people, when they have worked with me, feel like I'm a very confident person. And I'm confident to a certain extent, but not always in the ability that I can handle the job. So each time it's taken someone to encourage me, and there's that one person in this room who was instrumental in that as well. So it's always have someone there that can be your mentor. And you're going to have a lot of opportunities to bring those people who serve as your close mentors along the way. But now I am back in a school system that I started off as a high school bus driver. Wow. And tutorer in the extended day program. Then I did my substitute teaching and bus driver while I was putting myself through school. Because I commuted, I didn't live traditional college campus life. And so I've done every job other than maintenance. I mean, even in the summertime, my my great aunt was a cafeteria manager, so during summer school programs, we couldn't sit at home in the summer and do nothing. When we got out of the fields, then we went to help clean up the kitchen after summer.
Okay, and before Nicole closes us out, oh, did you have something? I'm
Can
sorry.
I ask one question?
Sure.
This is, we had not really related and even talked about specifically, but I'm just kind of wondering. I worked for two principals who were on the retirement end of the spectrum, and so I've seen them devote way more than you said, the 8 to 5 hours at school. And I'll be starting on the other end with a husband and a little boy, and I know all of us here are kind of all over the place with that. But I was just kind of interested in how you guys have managed the school versus family or.
Very good.
You go start. You start.
Yeah, you
first.
start that.
I can tell you that.
But I'm definitely gonna say something on that.
I have two children that are a year apart. They're now 23 and 24, but our life in education started off with me being their K-1 multi-age teacher. And then when I became an assistant principal when they were in 2nd and 3rd grade, and I gave them a choice. Do you want to go with me or do you want to stay at your current school? They chose to go with me. And then I was an assistant principal 2 years and then became their principal. God bless them, they thought I was going to go with them when they went to the next school. They're like, really, Mom? I was like, no. But, so I was lucky at that point that we could be together. I did put them in prime, we called it prime time, after school care, right down site, all of those kinds of things. I served a school when they were younger and when they were part of their middle school years that was more what you would call a middle class school. And although I put in a lot of hours, you're going to put in, you got the PTA, you got all of those kinds of things. You're on the clock all of the time. And so what you have to, what is very helpful to have is you have to have kids that, one of the things that was always I will be at my children's baseball games. I will be at my daughter's cheerleading competitions and her dance practices. I will be, that is a non-negotiable. I used to tell my staff, I believe, and I know we're not supposed to get religious in here, but when I go to heaven, I will answer for Lee and Kyle Hamlin first. I will answer for the children of North Carolina second. So I'm not going to admit, I can't get that back. So I will always, and my staff really kind of respected that. But as the principal, the other benefit is that I also created a calendar. I mean, let's just be serious, right? So amazing when our PTA meetings came out and it wasn't the same time as Jack Britt was having their baseball games. You understand what I'm saying? But then as my children got older, I became the principal of a very needy school, very impoverished, very crisis-driven school. And what ended up happening is Leah and Kyle and my husband, they just knew that if there was a crisis at Cliffdale, it was life or death. It was major issues. And so they became part of, we would adopt a family, anonymously, we would adopt a family from Cliffdale for Christmas, and we would do their Thanksgiving, and we would do, so they became not necessarily an in-house part of it, but they became a part of why it was so important to me, and why it took so much of my time, and why, the blood, sweat, and tears. And so they got it. But the other part is, I was still at the baseball games, I was still at their cheerleading, I was still there as mom. And when I went home, this is the hard part, when I went home and I was doing homework and all that, because even when they're in high school, you gotta be following around, like making sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. When I got home, I was mom. I walked in the door and I was mom until they went to bed. And then they went to bed, and I was back to being principal again. And I would do my work once they went to sleep. And, you know, it's long, it's hard, it's tiring. I joke around that people look at me in pictures and say, oh my God, you can tell while you were being a mom. I'm like, no, it wasn't while I was being a mom, it was while I was being a principal. But you just have to remember that you don't devalue their time with them.
Well, I'm on the other end of that spectrum. Second marriage, so I had 2 marriages, no children of my own. So I was single going into the assistant principalship. So I had the crazy idea that I could just work and work and work till I about work myself to death. So don't do that. As a principal, coming into the profession of being the principal, I had great mentors that said, I'm gonna drive by your building, and on Christmas break, I better not see your car. You need to get out of the building. I am now married, been married for almost 5 years, and I have 2 very vibrant boys that play baseball all the time. And they have expectations of me. And I do help make the calendar, so they keep coming to ask me, well, when are you going to change the calendar so I don't have to go to school? I was like, I can't do that. So even though I didn't birth them, they have expectations of me as a mom. So when I get home, it is homework. It is sitting down, it is talking, are you okay? And then, as you said, you go back to being principal or whatever job you have after hours and understanding. Now, one thing that was different for me, I had one superintendent that didn't have small kids. Now I have a boss that does have small kids, so when I say the sitter can't get there, I have to take them to baseball practice, they're fine. But I'm always connected with the bat phone. The bat phone is always on. You're 24 hours on the job. Husband will take the phone sometime. I stop arguing about it. Then I know, hey, my balance is off. You have to recognize when your balance is off. So I'm kind of on the other end of being single. Oh my God, I'm a mom and a wife and all this other stuff, and I'm the boss. So it's about balance.
The only thing I'd like to add is just to keep in mind, a lot of people in our society think teaching, education is easy. It's a cushy job. But it is the hardest job in life to me. And your significant others, your spouses, your family are married to your job too. I mean, my children, I've got 2, one's 19 and the other's 12, soon to be 25.
Skip the teenage years.
Yes, skip the teenage years. And they have, when I have PTA meetings, when we had dances, when we go on field trips, when they could without getting them out of school, they came with us. My husband is military. He's actually still active as a reservist and a middle school, currently a middle school math and science teacher. And he's been between middle school and high school because I actually hired him. So we weren't married at the time. But once we got married, he had to be a different campus. So yeah, he was a coach. And, you know, he coached soccer, and he's coaching my daughter basketball now. They have not been able to get rid of any parent. It's always been one of us has either been an administrator or a teacher of them. But they know, they're accepting. If you're open with them and you're inclusive with them about your job and what you do, I know you can't talk about your job all the time with them, but you gotta give them their time. That's important. And family comes first. You say that, you gotta mean it too for yourself. And yes, we do have to be reminded that we get out of balance. And okay, Monica, you just got home. It's time. You don't have to pull that computer up tonight. And a lot of times I wait till the children go to bed, and I'm a night owl. It's very typical to get an email from me 12:30, 1 o'clock at night. So I don't go to bed that early. But it is an all-inclusive, and you need that family support. It is a hard job, so you've got to have someone that's going to hold you up when you need to be held up.
Thank you, ladies. And actually, before Nicole give the closing remarks, if you were sitting now looking for an assistant principal to come and serve in your district, name 2 or 3 things that you would absolutely be looking for in the individual that you want to hire.
For me, my top 2, first of all, would be knowledge of curriculum instruction and gonna seem very broad, but also I'm gonna be asking questions regarding their personality to see if they fit the culture that is currently in my building. So I think there's a perfect fit for everybody, but, you know, very often, I think we can teach people to be managers. Curriculum, knowledge of curriculum instruction and how to coach teachers is vital.
I would say loyalty and a willingness to learn.
Instruction, being an instructional leader and understanding what that really means is important. And being able to, I like to, just as you have asked us, I like to be able to share scenarios and hear what kind of responses that candidate can provide. And in their responses, I'm looking for their strategic ability to make connections, and knowing something when you come in to an interview. You don't have to know it all, but you need to know something. and if you don't know your standards, you haven't done your homework. And if you don't know curriculum, and not that you have to know every single content standard, but if you don't know the importance of CIA, then you're always going to be a step behind.
We covered a lot of the questions on there and talked about some more that weren't there. I think adding the balance, because obviously none of our panel guest members got through all the degrees that they have done and got to that terminal degree without trying to find a balance, and sometimes probably had to have some reminders from family. But when I sit there and probably calculate the years of experience that just sat there and shared with you what their career was, I just appreciate all of them for coming today, spending their Friday afternoon when many of the school districts are now in a 4-day work week, and they gave up their day here to come and spend an afternoon with you to answer some questions with their experience, and I just appreciate you being here. We don't have any slot machines for you to circulate. You know, they asked if they were going to have to do the little kick dance or anything like that. I said, do what you want to, but we'll have some other people behind us doing some of that. But we appreciate everything that you offer to them, because these experiences, we can come to class and we can talk about things from a book, but this is real world, real experiences, and I think those are the experiences from the NELA cohort that mean the most to them.
And Caroline, you know, we do believe in celebrations, like they said. So would you like to lead us in a celebration for this panel?
Oh my. I would like to thank all of
Oh, thank you so much. Make you feel good, right?
I would like to
thank all of you for today. Very good.
And we won't sing the Michael Jackson affirmation. We can do that one too.
Okay. You can put the music back on now. We get ready to travel from Vegas, but we're gonna go out with a bang.
Oh.
Good luck, you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank
you. Good luck.
Thank you.
I don't know if this will be having people on this or not. But I know that this is probably a wrap-up time for you. Just a little bit of business. The next time we come, we have on tap to be a 9 to 4 day. With that 9 to 4 day, we'll start at 9 o'clock. And James and I plan on starting out with the group that went today, some reflection with the feedback that you got. And then we'll be, yeah. I hope it's not X-rated behind me. Then we'll probably be working on kind of a culminating activity with our celebrations and some of the things that we have covered with all the techniques. Then we're going to be putting you in groups to go over some of those SMART goals by levels, elementary, middle, and high, so we can finish that process. And then pretty much after that, it's going to be time to break for an hour-long lunch. And our thought was when we came back is, many of you are getting those apples for the first time, and some of you may feel more comfortable with it or not, but what's some of the things that you were willing to maybe give an overview, because Keith was going to offer to come and do like an apple overview for the afternoon session.
one of the things that I had mentioned to Dr. Smith and Dr. Ellis was I would be willing to maybe take 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, and just do some basic hands-on Mac setup in terms of setting up the mail program. Maybe adding like your personal handwritten signature to your emails, how to use like the Keynote and Pages programs. But of course, if there's an interest, I wouldn't mind doing it. But if there's not, then I'm personally not going to be upset at all. But if that's something that you guys think we might be able to do together, I'd be more than willing to do that. But that's again,
Let's see a thumbs up.
Speak up, Mike.
I'm sorry. But if that's something you guys would be interested in, I would not mind us working together on that. But if it's not something the group's interested in, there's absolutely no personal indictment there at
So
all.
what the agenda's probably gonna be is us break from lunch from like 11:30 to 12:30. I think I told you one earlier. Come back at 12:30. Keith will do the spiel. If you've had MacBooks and you've already been there, done that, don't need any of that, then we're gonna let you make that decision to do what you need to do. But I think at the front end of the program, that might be something to get, because I know, like, I don't have a MacBook, so if I had one, that 45 minutes would probably save me a lot of stress. It's the little things, but they take time when you're trying to figure it out for the first time. So he's planning to do that, and, oh, you want me to, I thought you were, and I were gonna come and out do the kicks together.
Oh, Lord.
To end the show.
Please do.
No, if I do any kicking, it'll be drop kicking somebody like I'm
James and I were going to leave virtually and go join one of the casino tables. But that's what the idea was for our last class. Does that sound?
Okay, that's good. Okay, good. All right. Any more comments or?
It's the next Friday, right?
Yeah, next
It's
Friday.
June the 27th.
And we'll make the adjustments if we have to change rooms or whatever and all that. So
We hope for a cooler room.
Yes, man.
So that's why we want to get you out of here because it is hot in here. Okay.
And I'll send out an email to everybody. If you would just reply if there's something in particular that you would like to know and don't know, send that back and then I'll certainly be glad to cover.
Can I request something?
Yeah, sure.
Could you make like a list of things, because sometimes we don't even know the things that we don't know.
Okay. So like a handout that might have
Or
some.
no, just like in your email, just like here are some things I
Okay.
can show everybody, what are the ones that you guys want.
That's a great
Sure.
idea.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely do that.
All right. Now, once again, we want to thank Group 5 for a wonderful day and the refreshments again. And you will get your feedback real soon. And if you have not turned in your feedback, if you'll just put it face down on my computer over here and help us to clean up. And then after we clean up, it'll be reflection time. If you want to work or do some things here, you're free to do it. If you're not, you're free to go on home and drive safely. Okay? Have a good day.
I typed notes. Does anybody want them?
Yes.
It's just reflection of your thoughts and stuff. You don't have to send anything in. Okay, and then I'll respond. Okay.
And ECPS.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Adam? I'm telling you how to say that. I'll troubleshoot on this. And by next Friday, I'll finish it.
Presentation.
The next is gone. No problem. I'm sorry, my music. I'm so used to
This goes here.
I love music. My kids always tell me about these new albums. I'm like, all right, don't buy it. And it's garbage. So I'll just like buy albums. And I'm like, ugh, this is not worth it.
Caroline.
Yes.
Caroline. This is Caroline's job.
I think so. Something I need to do.
Okay.
Somewhere, something we have to share.
Vanessa and I.
I'm sorry.
I'm so, I apologize.
Billy, you know which remote cut that off? She's trying to cut that off.
The one that says Sony, big gray one.
Was that your white jacket? Okay, you got
I found my jacket, my coat. My chair.
That's
It's the first time that I was able to just like.
You, I mean, you have a touch phone though. And then, but. So I guess I owed you one. So that's why I had to beat you up a little bit right here. You did the presentation, so I had to answer. If you were my grandma, she'd be like, thank you for dealing with me today.
We come back, I mean, thank you so much.
Okay, yes, if you you're going after
Okay, you been off.
Hey, I'm here for green.
Yeah.
You can't go right here and have.
So, now you're fine.
That's right down here, without saying that.
Thank you, right over there by the cleaners.
Also,
Yeah.
It's already
now I don't like to see it completely blocked out. Like I did not change the password.
You have my number, right?
Yeah, I got you. So you can call me or text me. Yeah. That'll work. That's a good thing.
And it says like,
That'll get me set up more.
but I never changed it.
So now you're.
But I'm bringing it to you now.
Maybe when you.
I mean, I don't know if maybe Apple is probably not good.
Well, if you do have a problem, you can take it to the state health
Oh,
But,
yes.
5 minutes later, you have a good one.
I know.
I will be.
See you.
Bye, y'all.
You have a good one. Bye-bye, you have a good one.
I'll be right back. Yeah, you can done
If I'm not mistaken, I mean, I know everything, Ms. Jenkins was happy, everything is plus.
It will, the scores went up, but she was still right at 20 something.
Yes.
You know, I mean, and that fifth grade math.
That's what I'm saying, I don't
And to fourth grade, because there are a lot of fractions in that fourth grade.
So you asking me, what did I do with my bag? You're asking me a lot to teach math. I'm gonna cry.
Don't you, Sue, you can do it.
Do you know if she going that way?
No, she's definitely making you all. You need to get to your block.
I'm sorry.
I mean, oh, wait a minute.
And when I spoke to them about, well, me and Miss Linda had talked about ability to do that, she relayed at the fourth grade, like, we weren't gonna do this boys and girls. Appeal to me. Because I feel like, I'm thinking language arts, when we do seminars and discussion, I would like to have some good mixture in there.
When I told her that she wasn't looking at, you all being self-contained, that's what she said, fifth grade was the lot, and fourth grade is one of them. So she's still looking at that question.
She know I'm young. I'm gonna tell Ms. Almond she just didn't want to be on leadership. Because she wanted me to do leadership on mission. You're gonna have to do it because she's gonna be there as administration. So she's gonna be there anyway. I'll be there too. Which is good because I told her I want as much transitioning planning to get me ready for school executive.
Because next year, can you believe it, a year? As I think about it.
And I go to all the board meetings too, and no other teachers do that, and I wonder if that's.
For me, I'm like,
I just go because I wanted to learn.
are you still taking? I don't know. Where Kika? Oh, it needs to go on. Still in order.